Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Real Talk with Rick podcast. This is a podcast of all things and people concerning Eden Prairie. On this episode of Real Talk with Rick, I have a conversation with Len Simich. Len is the Chief Executive Officer of Southwest Transit. So if you haven't heard of Southwest Transit, you've probably seen their buses on the highway or on the road, the black buses with the green lettering. And that's Southwest Transit. That's a service for Chaska, Chanhassen, Carver, and Eden Prairie. Len is the Chief Executive Officer. And in our conversation, we talked about his career in transportation, the current operations of Southwest Transit, and what we can look forward to in the future of transit and transportation globally, and also just with Southwest Transit. So if you've heard of Southwest Transit before, this is your chance to get a little bit of a deeper dive into what they are all about. And if you've never heard of them at all, it should be an interesting introduction into the transit that serves our area. So here is my conversation with Len Simich. Len, thank you for coming in.
Well, it's my pleasure.
It's good to see you.
Well, thank you.
All right. So Len, I mentioned in the introduction that you are with Southwest Transit. Maybe we should start there. What is Southwest Transit?
Well, Southwest Transit's your hometown transit agency. So we provide your regular transit, your regular route transit from Eden Prairie, Chanhassen, Chaska, Victoria, and Carver. So we provide different types of service. We have our daily express service to downtown Minneapolis and the University of Minnesota. We run what we call Prime, which is a service much like Uber or Lyft. You call up for a ride. We come and get you. Our goal is to get you within 20 minutes. We do a host of special event services, Twins, Vikings, Gophers. The one most people know us for is the State Fair.
Sure. Where are your park and rides? Where are your locations?
Well, we cover the 212 corridor, so Eden Prairie being our biggest, about 1,000 stalls. We have one in Chanhassen off 212 and 101. We also have one in Chanhassen up behind the dinner theater. We have one in Chaska, and that's at 41 and 212. And we have one out in Carver, which is on Jonathan Carver Boulevard and Highway 212.
And I asked you because I knew that. I knew where those were. I think I've been to all of them. I was just thinking about the Carver one. I forget about the Carver one every now and then. I don't head that far west as often. But is that the newest?
That's the newest, and it's actually not ours.
Okay.
What we did is, and we provide service to Carver under contract. We helped Carver design that. We helped Carver go out and get the funding for that. It's federal funded, 80% of it. But it's actually owned by the city of Carver.
And sometimes, people will say they recognize you by the buses, right? The look and the brand of the buses.
That is correct. We are very distinct. We are the only buses in the Twin Cities, at least for public transit, that are not white. Ours are black with a green logo, so we do stand out in the crowd.
Yeah, well, I think that's a good thing. Then maybe many listeners are thinking that they might be familiar with the white buses, and they think about all the buses that they see, and from Minneapolis all the way out to Edina. So why is it that Southwest Transit isn't part of the white bus operation? How did that come about?
Well, at one time, the service was provided by what was then the Metropolitan Transit Commission, which is now Metro Transit. Back in the 80s, communities that were paying in through the property tax for transit service but really didn't receive much back were able to what was called Optout. And Eden Prairie, Chanhassen, and Chaska, besides other communities that we don't serve but other agencies do, opted out and were able to form their own transit agency through a joint powers agreement. And that's how we were born, back in the mid-'80s, 1986 to be exact.
86. I was going to ask, when did When did Southwest Transit start? I knew it was the 80s. I forget what year it was, but 86.
1986, correct.
And the term is opt-out. So you hear people say opt-out because I think we're Southwest Transit. I say we because we're part of it, obviously. I think is there like 6 in the area, or how many are around the metro here?
Actually, there's been some consolidation. So you have Minnesota Valley,
Okay.
which is the biggest, and that's 6 communities on the south side of the river. There's Southwest Transit. There's Plymouth, which is a single city service, and then Maple Grove.
Those and MVTA is the biggest one.
That is correct.
And that's the 6 cities that are kind of, we like to say, south of the river, right?
That
south
is correct.
And east.
I should also say there is one other one that came in after the 80s, and that's the city of Minnetonka.
Okay.
Now, they have opt-out authority, but they have not exercised that.
In the history there would be that many of these suburbs were saying that for what we pay and what's on our property tax, because, again, you have the city and the school and the county, but people don't realize you have all these other taxing jurisdictions that are on your property tax statement, like the Mosquito Control District and the Metropolitan Council. And for transit, the idea was that these suburbs would be better served if the money was kind of carved out and separate transit was created for those organizations.
Right, that is correct. And people that will look at their tax statement today will see a tax levied by the Metropolitan Council. That's different. That is not how we are funded or were funded. Back up until, I think it was 2000, 2001, our operating funds came off the property tax. So each community would contribute, and those were the dollars that were used to fund our operation. That changed dramatically. They switched us over to the motor vehicle sales tax. Now, the good and bad of that, your property tax did reduce. Mm-hmm. The problem is growing communities. I'll use Eden Prairie as a prime example. When we were on the property tax, we were able to generate more revenue, which we could put into service to meet the demands.
The growing demands of the commuter.
Exactly, right? Exactly. So when we shifted over to the motor vehicle sales tax, there was a snapshot taken in time of 2001. That is how we're funded even today. So we have not been able to keep up with the growth in our communities. Now, 2001, Eden Prairie was pretty much built out or getting close to it. But communities that we serve west, Chanhassen, Chaska, the Carvers, and so forth, really started their big growth spurt around that time. So the dollars that we have generated really haven't kept up with that. I always like to use Shakopee, which is not one of our communities, but if you look at what happened to Shakopee since 2001, it's night and day, especially with the number of jobs that have come into that community. So we've fallen behind from a suburban standpoint.
Okay. Yeah, and I think that there is a lot of time spent, from what I know. Well, really, maybe a step back, too, because I want to ask you about the organization, then we can talk about the challenges right now and what you see coming, because we want to paint that full picture. How many people work for Southwest Transit, and who do you report to?
I'll start with the last question first. I report to a board of directors. The board consists of 2 members from each of our founding cities, so Chanhassen, Chaska, Eden Prairie. One of the 2 members has to be an elected individual. Most have 2 that are elected, so mayors, city council members. The 7th member is a member at large, chosen by the other 6. Historically, that individual has been a rider, and so that you have that touch with the riding community. So it's worked very well. So that's who I report to, and then I run the organization. So all the staffing and so on and so forth related to the organization. We have about 30. I think we're at 34 Southwest employees. Now people say, how can you run that organization with 34 employees? That's because we contract for all the drivers. So we receive our drivers through First Transit, which is a big international firm. They're one of they call it the big 3 in our industry. And we employ just shy of 100 drivers for our operation, which then will almost double during the state fair time because we bring in school bus drivers to augment, to help us run that. Yep.
So outside the State Fair, I'm going to ask about State Fair, but outside of that, how many buses then are we talking about? Like today, right now?
Our fleet is just south of 90 vehicles, and that is the 45-foot coach that you see that we're known for, as well as all the small vehicles we use to run Prime.
Prime. How many Prime vehicles are there right now?
Right now, I think we're at 17 Prime vehicles and growing.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's an excellent new service I'm gonna ask you about. And then the budget. You were talking a little bit about the budget. I see it's kind of a, at least in 2018, it was about $12 to $13 million operation. That's what we're talking about, how you get your funding from. And it looks as if about 27% of that comes from the fairs.
That's
fairs that people pay. And then, closer to that 3/4 is that intergovernmental revenue.
That's correct. That's through the motor vehicle sales tax. One thing we have been very fortunate is a number of years ago, we also became involved with real estate. And Southwest Station is a prime example. So when we took down that 21 acres where we have the station and the parking ramp, we also had all the other property, and we master planned it, brought in a private developer, and we made cash off selling that property. We took that same model west, and so we've done it in both Chanhassen and Chaska. So we have a separate arm that helps fund some of the bus system you have today. So when transit suffered some big up and downs, especially around the 2008 financial crisis, when the housing market kind of crashed, we were able to stay flat and not cut like a lot of other services did because we had this other arm.
Yeah, and so you're talking about Southwest Station, because that's obviously near and dear to us too here in Eden Prairie, that at that kind of technology drive, Prairie Center, that development, as you said, where we now have the two kind of retail centers, strip centers, and then now you've got the Elevate project that's being under construction right now, the 222 apartments above what'll be like 13,000 square feet of retail. You've got an 800 stall park and ride along with all of your offices, but that's going to change.
That is going to change. Actually, we're over 900 stalls.
I'm sorry.
There.
I didn't mean to short you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
And which are full for the most part.
Yes.
There's
yes,
not
I've
much
seen
room
it.
in the end there.
No.
But, things are going to change. With light rail coming into Southwest Station, we have sold the station and office building to the Metropolitan Council, who will be building a new station on site that will be a joint station for the LRT rider as well as the transit rider. However, we have moved the administrative offices. Most of the administrative staff now is housed up at our garage, which is also in Eden Prairie, up off West 62nd. And I am actually over in Chanhassen, myself and our marketing team.
Okay. And so is this an interesting future that's coming where you're going to have this coexistence? I mean, we've called it for a while this multimodal station here, where you're still going to have buses coming in and out of Southwest Station as we've always had. And now there's going to be, we call it either the beginning of the line or the end of the line, following, 2023 is the current plan for the first rider to be on Southwest Light Rail. That's going to be a multimodal facility. It's kind of a first for you, right? Like this agreement between Southwest Transit and the Met Council and Met Transit to operate jointly out of that site is going to be unique.
It is unique, and it didn't come easy. I mean, we had 3.5 years of negotiation, but at the end of the day, I think who won really is the citizens of Eden Prairie, as well as the other communities we serve, because now you have a lot of options.
Yeah.
Now we will continue, at least that is our plan, continue our regular express services. And the reason for that are really two major ones. One is time. Now and into the future, as long as we can tell, we're going to be faster than the rail. Mm-hmm. The rail has a number of stops. Whether it's 15 to 17 is yet to be determined, but there are going to be a number of stops once you leave Eden Prairie. It also comes in on that north side of downtown behind Target Field. The bulk of our ridership is from 12th to 6th downtown, more on the south end.
Sure.
And a lot of it up off 11th because of Target. So we see a demand and need for our services. So we will continue to provide those during the peak hour. Now, off-peak, we provide off-peak service, evening service, and that's really because it gives people options and it makes transit available to them. Rather than say, oh, I only have limited times I can take it, I'm not going to use the bus. Now you can come and go pretty much all day. But those off-peak times are not as productive for us. And so those are the times we will look to the rail to provide that service. And we'll take that savings and reinvest it. We're looking at new service going across 494 corridor, something we do not have today.
Right.
We're looking at our prime service and increasing that. That's the one area that's been exploding for it. It grew 34% last year. And the only reason it didn't grow any higher than that, we didn't have the buses or the funding at the time to increase it.
Yeah.
So we see a lot of opportunity. So we don't look at rail as a threat. We really look at it as a way that, hey, we can do some new things.
Yeah, I think we've always said it's you've got, you even offer bikes at your location to get the bikers to the last stop maybe, and then the rail might offer the opportunity to keep going all the way to the airport or the state capitol. But you're right. I think if, for instance, if we talk about the Twins games or the Viking games, that you can get on your bus and get there sooner than any other mode of transportation that still exists.
Exactly. And you talked about the bikes. That's one thing that we have implemented for a number of years now. But we're looking at scooters. We're looking at autonomous. We really think because of the rail and when it comes into the Golden Triangle that we are prime for a demonstration. And we're working with the city and Robert Ellis, with the state and with the U of M, and we're actually trying to become that first demonstration project for the state.
Yeah, no, I was going to ask you about autonomous vehicles. First I want to ask about Prime, though.
Sure.
Because we talked about the express bus, and I think what most people have seen for a number of years is the Southwest Transit buses on the shoulder of the highways back and forth, and even downtown, all over the place. Back in my Hopkins days, that's when I'd see the bus, even though that wasn't serving Hopkins, but I was familiar. So that's kind of been that bread and butter. But you just said one of the fastest growing areas, we used to call it dial-a-ride, or
right.
that term for dial-a-ride, Southwest Prime. It's kind of an on-demand service to multiple locations at different times of the day, right?
Right. It's point to point. So we'll pick you up at your house, deliver you to wherever you're going, and bring you back. And we set it up more like an Uber and a Lyft. The old dial-a-ride was I'll call in advance, maybe a week, and book my trips. What happened in those systems, and still happens in those systems, people will call and make multiple trips. Even though they're only going to be taking one, they're not quite sure which one they want. Well, many times they hang on to those trips where it's too late for somebody else to access the system and book their ride. Therefore, you have a lot of vehicles that are sitting around not being very productive. Our system is when you're ready to ride, you call. So you lose that no-shows or cancellations and all those things, which are a big cost. And because of that, and because we've done a few other things where on the long trips, midday we'll have a transfer point at one of our stations, and that way we can keep buses zoned and moving all the time. We've been able to take the subsidy per passenger, the cost that we bear, down to the same amount as our express. And about half.
That's impressive.
It really is.
That's
about
impressive.
Half of what any other demand response service in the Twin Cities has. Metro Mobility's up in the $21 subsidy per passenger. It's a totally different type of service than ours, but that is a demand response. Or you have dial-a-rides up in Maple Grove or Plymouth, and they are a lot more expensive than ours just because of the way we operate.
No, it's just, as you said, it just keeps growing, and the demand was greater than even what we're saying, the amount of people that you can hire and the amount of buses that you can purchase.
Yeah, and I guess we shouldn't be surprised by that. We started this really as a last mile, get people to and from work. But then it just caught on with the whole community, and where it's really catching on is with the senior community. And as our communities age, more and more people are going to need to access that type of service. And Mondays, our seniors ride for $1 day. And this is all driven by technology. You know, you can call up for a ride.
Do you check IDs?
No, we don't check IDs.
Okay. Right.
But I'll tell you something. We do. You can call for a ride the old-fashioned way, or use an app. And everybody said, well, you know, with the senior pop, they figured it out. For $1 on Monday, they figured out the app. Yes, they did.
Yeah. Well, you know, it's interesting because you've got, you said you've got the app for, you know, I think you probably started out with an app to show you what all the routes were and the times, but now I think your technology is caught up to where you can purchase, right? Your mobile ticket app, is that what it's called? Where you can pretty much set everything up
that's
electronically.
Yeah, we were, again, one of the first, the first in this region. We did the app where you could get real-time information, you could get schedule information, and it's just taken off from there. Now you can buy your tickets off the app in our stations. So we staff our stations outside of Eden Prairie just 1 day a week. Eden Prairie's staffed all 5. But we've set up kiosks at the other ones that you can pick up the phone, and now you have a live chat with somebody, and it's like Skype. And so we don't have to have them staffed every single day, but you can get that same service from every. So technology is a real big thing for our organization.
No, I think technology, and then just, you know, how, you know, what a high quality ride you deliver. You know, I think now, you know, maybe 5 years ago, like Wi-Fi, you might have been the only operation that was doing Wi-Fi. Maybe others have caught up, but I know Southwest Transit was the first, and kind of the comfort of the buses that, you know, I think that's an important thing that you got into pretty early. I'm only familiar with you from the last 7-8 years, but.
Yes, and it was by design. We looked at the demographics, who we're serving out here. Not a lot of people that are transit dependent. That doesn't mean we don't have individuals that need and rely on us for their only form of transportation, but by and large, most people not only have one car, they probably have 3 sitting in their driveway. So how do you get an individual out of their car and onto the bus? Well, you have to do a number of things. One is the type of equipment we do operate. It is of a high end. Now, when I say that, the cost isn't really any different than the articulated, the accordion-looking bus that Metro runs. That actually costs about $250,000 more than our coach.
Okay.
It's a 12-year bus. Ours is a 14. And when you start looking at mileage and you start looking at maintenance, ours is a much better buy. And we're only giving up 6 seats. So we said this is a real premium way to transport people, something that's going to be desirable. We need that to attract people.
And not, as you just said, not at a huge increase in cost as compared to the typical bus that someone may think of, the non-coach bus, like you said.
Right. So we just really need to do that. And reliability and customer service, all those things play together. That's how we attract. That's why we were the fastest growing transit system in the state for about 5 years in a row. So those are the things, and you know, when I talk to colleagues around the country, and they ask about the communities we serve, and you start pulling up some of the information, you know, the average house, the average wage, and they're like, you have a transit market in these communities? And we have.
Yeah.
Because I think we've been able to deliver what they want.
And then, so speaking of delivering what people want to get to the state fair. They want to get to the Vikings games. I don't know why they would, but they do. The Twins games, which I've done. So it's a great kind of express service. You do concert service, too. I wasn't as aware of that depending on a big show, downtown, you guys do concert service, but state fair.
Yep.
Over 100,000 rides.
104,000 last year.
104.
Outside of the one free service that runs from the University of Minnesota, more people access through our gate than any of the other transit systems or transit areas in the whole city. That's Metro Transit, that's Minnesota Valley, that's Plymouth. Everybody who runs to the fair, we put more people through our gate than any of them. And we do it because we operate a little differently. Most of the other agencies are operating on what's called a fixed schedule or time schedule. So they'll run every 15 to 30 minutes or may stretch to an hour midday. We run on a load and go. So when that bus is full or close to it, it goes. we don't hold a bus more than 15 minutes. So it's always moving. Now, we also have a lot of staff on the ground, both at the fairgrounds and at our facilities, or it could be at the church that we use during the week. But we take that extra effort. Now it costs more to deliver that type of service, and we charge more. So we actually, our fare to go to the state fair is $8 round trip, $4 one way. It's still a bargain, but we do charge more, and we're not making money. We're really breaking even, and our goal is to provide something back to the communities. Because not everybody works downtown. And we know that. So what other type of services can we provide that the communities can take care of? When I go out and do my talks, whether it's at a Rotary or Lions Club or whatever, I always ask, who's heard of us? Every hand goes up in the room. And why? Usually the State Fair.
State Fair, absolutely. And then in terms of in terms of being innovative in technology, we talked a little bit about the apps and whatnot, but I mean, you have a Snapchat filter now. So once you guys got a Snapchat filter, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I mean, now you're very hip, Len.
Yeah. Now you're going to.
You've got a Snapchat filter.
When it comes to technology, my staff will say, I'm the last guy you want to ask about any of this stuff.
Yeah.
I do have a very creative staff that is trying to find new ways to get information out and to engage the rider. So all the credit goes to them. I can turn on my computer and phone, and that's about as far as I go.
So your staff says Instagram, Snapchat. You're like, I don't know what you're talking about, but if it works, it works. Let's do it.
My first question is how much?
Yeah, fair
then,
enough.
If it's reasonable, then it's like, okay, let's do it.
Yeah, you sound like me. That makes sense. What's ahead for Southwest Transit too? There's Prime, but I just read about Prime MD.
Yes.
Prime MD. What's that?
Well, it's kind of taking off of Prime. It's a demand response service, but we're running it a little bit different. For one, we'll go out of our service area, meaning our 5 cities, our 3 core cities in Carver and Victoria. We'll now go beyond that. So we're trying to work with the medical facilities. Could be out in Waconia, could be in Shakopee, could be in Edina, St. Louis Park. And we're working with them that we would deliver really non-emergency medical trips. And the reason for that is
So you're not there. So by the way, the ambulances still exist.
No, we're not doing that.
Yes, got it.
So what it is it's following up on what we're hearing from the community, what we're hearing from the medical community of a real issue. They're saying there's a huge cost of trips or canceled medical appointments because people cannot access the facility and they need some transportation. And we're hearing that from our communities as well. Former Mayor Tara Lukens, who says, I'm a child of 2 aging parents that it seems like all I am doing is running them to doctor appointments. Now with a system like this in place, you have that reliability. Someone's coming, they're getting your parent, your grandparent, or whatever the case may be, and getting them to the medical appointment. Now, with this, where it differs from Prime is we're allowing you to book your ride 2 weeks in advance. So you have your medical appointment, you can book it, but you book your return when you're done. Because who hasn't been in the doctor's office and I have a 2 o'clock appointment and they haven't even come out and gotten me until 3 o'clock. So it takes that pressure off the individual. And in Metro Mobility, when you sign up for your ride, if you're not there when they pull up, they wait 5 minutes and then they're gone. And so that's been a big issue and led to a lot of fear, especially in older adults. So we see this as kind of an in-between. Now, because we're going out of the service area, it's going to cost a little bit more, and we're trying to work with the medical industry to help subsidize part of that. So the actual end user won't see any difference than a regular Prime ride.
Sure. No, it seems like you're not only, filling another need, but being flexible and improving on, other operations out there that have issues. So the future of Southwest Transit, we talked about what Southwest LRT means, a light rail transit, Prime MD, serving 494, and you touched upon this earlier, autonomous vehicles. So you see a day, Len, here in Eden Prairie where there's a transit option with autonomous vehicles?
I do. I mean, you just have to look back in time. And at one time, everybody was getting around by horse and buggy. And there's a great slide floating around out there that shows New York City in the year like 1902. And the street is full of horse and buggies and one automobile. They go fast forward 10 years, that same street is all automobiles and one horse and buggy. Now, that happened in a 10-year time frame with no technology. So now you look at it, because a lot of people say, well, that's real futuristic. I don't think it'll ever happen. I think it's going to happen. I don't think we're there yet. We've looked at all the options that are available today. I don't think that's going to be the option for the future, but it's that starting point.
It's like you mentioned. It's piloting something. It's testing something. I was part of a meeting where we talked to actually Xcel Energy, and I know you've talked to them as well. We've got the whole electrification. We all want to electrify our fleets. All of us do. The City of Eden Prairie, Southwest Transit, if there's ways to do that. And at the same time, I think they were part of a study on autonomous vehicles as well, and wanting to see support for that. So I think, if I remember correctly, there are several states around us that have authorized the use, but I think we still need some legislation possibly to do that.
We do.
Yeah.
And in fact, there was a bill floating around. I don't think it'll get much traction or even a hearing, but would prohibit any autonomous demonstrations in the state.
So the opposite.
Someone
who wants to stop it.
Right. And so I've talked to our legislative delegation, and like I say, they don't believe it's going to get much traction. I said, we don't want to put the state at a disadvantage. Again, we don't want to put it out there until it's ready, but you don't want to put it at a disadvantage. And if you look at Minnesota and transportation, it's always been kind of on that leading edge. And we got some real bright people in this state that are working on this. And my message back to them was, let's not kill this thing. Let's see where it takes us.
Mm-hmm. Good. Well, I was thinking I'd be remiss if we didn't kind of talk a little bit about you personally. And thank you for the conversation about Southwest Transit. The city we want to be a partner of yours as well, and I know Chan and Chaska as well. But how does someone come to be the chief executive of Southwest Transit? Did you have was all your background in transportation? How did you get to this position, Len?
Well, most of my career has been spent in transportation, not just transit.
Okay.
I'm a planner by trade. I don't admit that freely,
right.
But I was a planner by trade.
Yeah.
And I was the planning director. Well, I'll go way back. I started in the transit career. I was the assistant general manager at the University of Minnesota and ran the campus system that had over 3 million rides per year taken. So it was a very big system.
Roughly when was this? This
was back in let's just say the mid-'80s.
The mid-'80s.
Yeah,
I want to age you. I want to date you. People are listening and they want to picture you right now.
Right. So mid-'80s, I did that. And then I went to a state-run organization, which is no longer around. It was called the Regional Transit Board. The Regional Transit Board was the agency that set up all the opt-outs. They controlled transit in the whole metropolitan area. The planning, the funding, all that came through the Regional Transit Board. I left that, went back to Duluth, and I ran the planning agency. I was the MPO, like the Met Council of Duluth Superior and the surrounding area.
Okay.
I ran that, and I did that for about 4 years. I also kept at the same time, I kept a consulting business, very small, back here in the Twin Cities. Southwest Transit was one of my clients.
Oh.
And they had some rough patches there back in the mid-'90s, around 96, 97, and they asked would I come in and help them out and kind of get the ship steered back in the right direction. I said I'd come in for 5 years, and that was 22 years ago.
22 years ago. So of the, let's say, 33-year history, roughly, you're 22 years of that, and you kind of came in at year 10 of the organization.
Correct. Yep.
Good.
1997.
Got it. So speaking of riding then, if you're riding a bus, not just from here to downtown or to the Twins game, but across the country, and you had to choose someone currently living or dead to travel with you, who would that be?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I don't know if I can answer it by just one individual.
So you got a lot of room in the
I got
bus.
a lot of
Of
room.
course you do.
So,
yeah. don't
you know,
want to have. It wouldn't be cost effective to have empty seats.
No, it would not. It would not. So I'm kind of one of these conspiracy theorist guys. So someone who can give me the answers. Who was involved in the Kennedy assassination? Area 51. What's really going on out there? So the stuff people don't know, I want to know.
Yeah.
So whoever can give me that, and I don't know who that is. Was it J. Edgar Hoover or who has all this detail? I want that person.
You want that person.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So you read a lot on kind of history and some of the conspiracy stuff that's out there. You kind of follow that.
Yeah, I am. I'm a history buff,
Sure.
As it is. But yeah, I am, and I probably don't read as much as I used to, but I watch all these goofy cable shows. And Jesse was onto something.
Oh man! Well, you with Netflix and Amazon and everything, there's more than enough documentaries to keep track of. So if you had a month off, you could take a month off. Where would you go?
Well, where I would go is I would go skiing for a month, and I say that because I love to ski. My wife does not. So if I had a month to myself. That's where I'm going. I'm heading to the slopes.
Okay, that's good. What would be something, Len, that most people haven't done or wouldn't think that you've done, but you've done?
Well, I played piano. I did that for 6 years. I went into trumpet, and then I gave it all up completely. Started getting into sports, so I gave up all the musical side of things. And most people... Well, if they've heard me play, they know why I gave it up. But that's one of the things most people don't know about me.
But when you said you gave it up, because you did it all the time quite a bit and then got into sports. But, I mean, right now, if we had a piano in front of us, you still would know how to play a lot of different songs. It stays with you,
I can play wonderfully with the right hand.
Okay.
Don't expect me to play on the left.
All right, fair enough. If you won the lottery right now, what would be the first thing that you would buy?
First thing I would buy would be a house for each one of my kids. I have 3 boys, and by doing that, it's very selfish. They don't come to me for more money. So you take care of one of the biggest expenses they're going to have in their life, and that'll set me up as well.
Good. Do they all live nearby here? Are they within the state?
They're all here in the metro area. I have one up in the northern burbs, and I have 2 down here in the southern.
Okay, good. So when you think of what a lot of people are obsessed with or what they're into, but you don't understand why or you don't get the point of what that obsession is there something that you see that you don't get? You just don't get it?
Yeah, it's something my kids are in, these video games. I don't get it. I find it a waste of time. But I'll tell you what, all these young kids are doing it, and that's not for me.
So that goes back, a couple decades now, probably into the 80s. So you kind of missed the whole video game generation.
Well, we had Atari.
Yeah,
and
Atari,
we had
Atari and Nintendo. I had a little bit. I had Atari as well.
Yeah, we had that back there, but no, I just never really got into that. And I just see the time that is spent on that. And again, it's recreation. They have fun, but sometimes the amount of time they spend is incredible.
No, it can be. And that being said, too, I think this concern about too much time people are spending even on their devices. Overall, not just, you can have games on your devices, but so much time on your device.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Unless, if they're on the Southwest Transit app, that's okay.
That's okay, and we have Wi-Fi on the bus, so get some work done.
All right.
No video streaming though, because it just eats up too much of that bandwidth.
Well, now I read this though, where you can do that, but there's a certain limit, right? You have to put a limit, which I think most providers do on a lot of people's internet. But
that is correct. We have the only unlimited plan that's limited. So we were exceeding what our provider was comfortable with, so we had to dial back on a few things.
Okay. All right. So if you had one rule, I've asked this at the last 3 guests, I think. If you had one rule that you could make that everyone had to follow, what rule would that be?
Well, I always kind of live by the golden rule. Now, some of my staff will say, well, that's easy. You have the gold, you make the rule. But that's not the golden rule I'm talking about. Yeah. But I think if we follow that, everybody gets along with each other much better.
So, good answer. And then maybe lastly, Len, what do you see for the next 5 or 10 years for yourself? What are your future plans? Is it continue to work and then eventually hit the ski slopes, or what's for you in the next 5-10 years? Personally?
Yeah, we're my assistant and I. We talk about this quite a bit. We're both about the same age and have been doing this about as long. If you're a baseball fan, you'll understand this analogy. We rounded third. So within the next 5 years, I see both of us moving on to a more of a retirement life. Now, will I stop working completely? That's yet to be determined. You find me on a golf course as a ranger? That's a good possibility. But I always have to keep myself busy doing something. But I do think from the full-time gig, it's time for somebody else to have a shot at it.
Sure. No, I mean, you've 20-plus years, and as we talked about just in this podcast alone, there's still a lot to be done, a lot coming up. You've provided just such great leadership to Southwest Transit, and I look forward to at least 2, 3, 4. I don't know how many more years, how much longer you want to do it, but thanks for coming on, Len.
Well, thank you, and we've enjoyed our partnership with all of our cities, but Eden Prairie's always been special.
The best one.
We have best one. We've been housed here.
Yep.
I used to house right here in City Hall, and you guys have done a lot and continue. So I appreciate that as well.
Well, thank you.